Hi, my name is Rochelle Harding, and I am the program manager at Verde and for the Home Garden program. And I just want to welcome you back to another monthly workshop. For August, I will be talking about harvest and food preservation. I hope that your gardens have been doing well and that you'll be able to apply uh, the things that we're going to be talking about today for your garden, and that it is producing a harvest for your family and to um, meet some of your nutritional needs. So let's go ahead. We'll talk about the overview of what we're going to talk about today. We will be briefly reviewing the July content, and our nutrition health topic is going to be on fats, healthy fats, and how to incorporate that into your diet, and then which types of fats to avoid. We'll be talking about, for our garden topic, harvest and food storage or food preservation, as I mentioned. Our climate change topic will be on climate change and the pandemic and how climate factors influence situations like the one that we're in with coronavirus, and what we can do for our action steps, both short and long term, to better withstand and prevent these types of situations where we're facing a global pandemic of a health crisis. Finally, we'll end with some announcements. So let's get started. In July, we talked all about pollination and how important it is for your plants and the different ways that flowers are structured, their anatomy, whether it's a distinctly male flower or a distinctly female flower, where there needs to be a cross-pollination between the pollen from the male flower onto the female stamen of the flower. And I'm sorry, stigma of the flower. And so when the pollen gets on the female part of the flower, then the fertilization can begin, and it goes down to the ovule, which is the female part that's similar to an ovary, where the egg is, and that is what helps produce the fruit. You can see examples of the male and female flower here on your screen. So for our male flower, there is no fruit attached at the bottom, and there's going to be a stigma that stands out, and there's going to be pollen there. For the female fruit, there is the fruit attached down here, and your flower is going to have a different structure than the male flower. But the main way to tell is by that fruit that's behind the blossom for the female flower. As you can see, there are some flowers that have both male and female parts. So the pollen from these parts of the kind of the male anatomy will get on the female receptor, and so that pollinization will then travel down, and the ovule is down here, and that is where fertilization of this self-contained flower, so that contains both male and female types of reproductive parts, are contained within this one flower. And so examples in our own garden of the self-pollinating, self-contained flowers are our peppers, our tomatoes, and then examples of the cross-pollinating where they have distinctly male and female would be more like your squash, cucumber, zucchini plants. When you have a blossom that is unpollinated, it is going to shrivel up and die because the plant does not want to waste energy growing something that is not going to produce fruit and which will not have seeds to continue reproduction of the plant species. So it's just going to die, and try again with another blossom to get that pollinated. We also discussed creating a welcoming habitat in your garden for pollinators. So not only does this mean not using pesticides and insecticides in your garden or anything for disease. We don't want any artificial chemicals, anything harsh, only organic methods, because nature has a really great way of balancing things out. When there's too many aphids, the ladybugs will come, and as long as you keep a diverse array of plants and flowers, they're going to be attracted to your garden. And so, so by planting pollinating flowers that attract the pollinators, you're going to increase your chances of successful pollination with your vegetables. And so you can do this through, like I said, planting flowers, but also having a water source available for bees and other insects and birds to drink from. That's going to help attract them to your garden. And then additionally, if you are able to like install a small mason bee house, and I will show you mine. It's right up here. So that bee house is going to attract mason bees, which are solitary bees. They don't form a hive or anything. They are actually the primary pollinators of most plants, as opposed to honeybees, which make a hive. Honeybees are also very important and endangered, as we learned last month, but we can do a lot to welcome other pollinators as well. And then finally, if your plants are struggling with not being pollinated and then the fruit is falling off and dying, you can do hand pollination, and you can do this by using a paintbrush on the male part of the flower and then brushing it onto the female flower. And that's going to pollinate. Or another method is you can actually just pluck off the male flowers, kind of pull back the petals, and then kind of rub it on the female flower and make sure you get the pollen onto the female flower so that it can pollinate. And unfortunately, many gardeners are having to do this more often because of the overuse of pesticides and various methods within agriculture that are really killing the pollinating species and or pushing them away. When we do large-scale monocrops, that is also going to decrease diversity of insect and plant and animal life, and it all has an impact on the ecosystem. And so we need to do our best to do organic methods and as close to the natural ecosystem as possible. Okay, so moving on, our health nutrition topic is on fats, as I mentioned, and there are different types of fats. And so fat is an essential part of the human diet. According to the Food and Drug Administration, fat is found in both plants and animals. When you look at the nutrition label on packaged food, you can see the total amount of fat as well as other types of fats. There are three main types of fat: saturated, trans fat, and unsaturated fat. So, and you can see on the chart over here that there are descriptions, there are descriptions of the various types of fat, but I'm gonna just go through and explain each one in case that print might be a little small for some of you to read. So saturated fat is found in animal products and is usually solid at room temperature. It can also be found in baked goods, condiments, gravies, dairy products, desserts, pizza, salad dressings, and snack foods, among other products. It is recommended that people keep their consumption of saturated fat to less than 10% of their total calorie intake each day. And just as a side note, 1 gram of fat is equivalent to 9 calories. So calories just mean energy, but just know that even if it says 3 grams of fat in a packaged item, which is totally fine, that's going to equate to 27 grams of, 27 calories for that food. So just be mindful that higher calorie intake when you're consuming fats. Trans fat is naturally found in small amounts in dairy, beef, and lamb. Trans fats are also formed artificially when food is processed, such as in items containing partially hydrogenated oils. Trans fats are the most unhealthy fats and should be consumed as little as possible. Check your nutrition labels for foods you eat regularly and make sure they do not contain trans fats. If they do, you may want to switch to an alternative food without the trans fat. Trans fats and saturated fats have been linked to greater risks of high cholesterol and heart disease. So we really want to be mindful of the types of fat we consume. Now, just as a side note, fat is essential for our bodies to function properly. So there are vitamins that we need for our nutrition. And so vitamins A, D, E, and K are all fat-soluble vitamins, meaning we need to ingest fat in order to absorb them into our bodies, and without the fat, they would not be usable by our bodies. So that's one reason fat is important in your diet. Fat helps stores energy, supports key body processes like blood clotting, nervous system functioning, reproductive system functions, and our immune system response. Fat helps maintain healthy skin and hair and is also necessary for proper growth and development. And as you can see on the screen, our recommended daily value of fat is 78 grams of fat per day. And this is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So if you are less active and require fewer calories, then your total fat count would be less than 78 grams. Or if you're very active and eat more than 2,000 calories a day, and this is a healthy, amount of food, energy for your body each day, then you might be able to go a little bit higher than that. But 78 is around the average recommended dose there. All right, so as you can see from the chart, they kind of have it categorized good, bad, ugly for fat. So we want those monounsaturated fats and the polyunsaturated fats. And you can see the examples would be our oils such as canola, olive, peanut, and sesame oils, fatty fishes, so like salmon is an excellent source of good fat, avocado, which unfortunately I'm allergic to, and then nuts and seeds. So then the saturated fats, this is going to be more where your meat and dairy products come in. So you want to limit the saturated fat. And then the really bad fat, it's going to be in all those processed foods that taste so good, but are really not good for us. So, the fried foods, the store-bought baked goods, anything with hydrogenated oil. So we really want to keep our consumption as low as possible for those. Okay, so let me go back one thing. I just wanted to give a quick cooking tip as well. So how you prepare your food matters. So if you eat a lot of vegetables but fry them in oil, you're losing many of the health benefits. You also increase the likelihood of developing high cholesterol. The fat you can eat, so the fat you eat coats your arteries. So the arteries are part of what carries blood back to your heart to be oxygenated, and then the veins take the oxygenated blood to the rest of your body. But when you have high cholesterol, the artery, so it's like the tube in your body that carries the blood, this is going to be coated with plaque. And just as you get plaque on your teeth, you get plaque in your arteries, and that restricts the flow of blood. And so it's going to lead to heart disease and potentially heart attacks or other cardiovascular issues. So limit the frying of your vegetables. Even though it's so tasty, we really need to limit. You can use as kind of a way to get that flavor without the negative health effects. You can use like a cooking spray oil and just spray the pan with the oil and then kind of just lightly saute it rather than just deep frying. Deep frying is should be limited to maybe very special occasions or traditions, but not in our regular diet. All right. So, eating too many of these trans fats will cause increased weight. and chances of becoming obese, which leads to higher chances of, like I said, developing heart disease and diabetes. So instead of using lard to cook foods, you're going to want to use a light olive oil or vegetable oil. Any fat that is in a solid form at room temperature is going to be less healthy than a fat that is a liquid. So you want to go for the oils, the olive oil, not lard, not butter or margarine. Those are going to be less healthy than like olive oil or a different cooking oil like that. So that was just a little cooking tip. Even though you're consuming vegetables, it does matter how you prepare them. Okay, so now on to our garden topic. So one common challenge for new gardeners is when to harvest their vegetables. Different plants have different requirements for the length of time to develop and different signs showing that they're ready. So you can refer back to the spring planting grid handout, which was given out in April. And you could also refer back to the video from April, which has a diagram in there. But that handout also had tips on when to harvest, what to look for, and so you can use that as a resource. Just some recommended tools that you might need in the garden when you're doing harvest. Some gloves, because sometimes your zucchini or different squashes or pumpkin, or depending on what you have in your garden, they can have little prickly spines on them. Or if you just want to keep your hands clean and not get that dirt under your nails that you have to scrub out later, garden gloves help. Pruning shears, so that's just the little clippers that you can use to prune, and that prevents you from accidentally like pulling too hard on the plant and ripping too much of the structure or damaging the plant by using clippers. You can also recommended to have a basket to collect your harvest. And then optional would be a scissors. I like using a scissors to harvest my lettuce, but you could also use a knife, or you can pinch it with your fingers. I just prefer you can do more at once when you're using a scissor or a knife tool. For root vegetables, when they're ready, you can also use a little those fork claws that you can kind of scrape through the dirt, because sometimes the dirt might be a little compact and difficult to just pull the plant up by the root. But you want to be careful not to damage the plant, of course, when you're using those tools. And you actually also want to be careful to not over disturb the dirt, because the structure of your soil is really important to the growth of the plant and to the health of the microorganisms and the worms and all the creatures that are in the soil. The more you dig and churn it up, the more you damage that structure. So we want to disturb it as little as possible. And so we don't recommend doing tilling at the end of the garden season. And so when you're harvesting, do your best to disturb the soil as little as possible. So let's go through some of these vegetables, and we'll talk about just ways to know when they're ready to harvest and how to go about doing that. So as you can see at the bottom of your screen on the left, carrots, onions, and radishes you're gonna know that they're ready when their shoulders push up out of the soil. So as you can see in the photo, the top of the carrot is pushing up out of the soil, and you can see it, and that is an indicator that it's ready. If it's still below the surface of the soil, then it may not be ready yet. And you can, gently brush the soil aside to see like how big around the diameter of the carrot is, or radish or onion, and kind of determine if you think it has gotten big enough, or if you want to give it a little bit more time in the garden. So that's one indicator for those. Also for onions and garlic, one way to tell is that they're the little leaves that the green stems that stand out of the soil, they're going to start to turn brown and fall over when the garlic is ready to harvest, or when the onion is ready. And that is because the plant is done growing, and so it's not wasting energy in maintaining the leaves anymore. So they're just going to fall over or turn brown, and then you'll know that they're ready to harvest. So there are also several vegetables that are called, or that can be harvested with a technique called cut and come again. And the reason for this is because if you cut them and leave about 1 inch of space at the bottom, as you can see in the photo here, there's about 1 inch left on the plant. So the roots are below the ground and you leave about 1 inch on top. And that is going to allow your lettuce, your spinach, kale, chard, mustard, bok choy, cilantro, basil to grow again. And if you wait until it bolts or flowers, then it's not going to be able to continue producing new leaves. And so this is a great method. You can also do the cut and come again by pinching the outside leaves and allowing the new growth to come out from the middle. And then you're just continuously picking the outside that way. However, I like just cutting the full plant with the 1 inch remaining, because it gives you a more quantity and you can have a full salad with your dinner with this method, and then it does regrow. I was able to do that several times with my lettuce in my garden. All right, for our bush and our pole beans, we had different varieties that went out this year. So the big thing with beans is that the bigger they get, they can get really big, but the bigger they get, the more they're going to be tough. They're going to lose their sweetness, and they'll just not be as flavorful. You do want to leave, a couple on the vine to fully grow and ripen and dry, and then you can save those seeds for next year. However, beans are going to taste best when they're smaller, so maybe 4 inches or less. They're thinner, and they're going to be more tender, sweet, and flavorful. So the other cool thing about them is that the more you pinch them off, the more you're going to get to harvest, because the more it will reproduce and continue to grow. All right, moving on to eggplant. So, let's see. Okay, so eggplants, you will know that they are ready when they're glossy. If they start to lose their shine, then they're going to start losing their flavor, and they'll become more wrinkly and bitter. So the Chinese eggplant variety that you can see in this photo and that we distributed to some of our sites, it's going to be ready when it's between 8 and 10 inches long, and again, nice and shiny on the fruit of the plant. Okay, our jalapeno and serrano peppers are going to gradually change color and become increasingly hot the longer they're on the plant. You want to harvest them when they're between 4 and 6 inches long. And it's very important with hot peppers to wear gloves when you're harvesting, because if you get the oils from the hot pepper on your hands and then you accidentally rub your eye or touch your nose or your mouth, it's going to burn. And so you really want to wash your hands after handling any hot peppers, and wear gloves when you're harvesting. So, all right, so for our sweet peppers, we had the California sweet variety this year. You're going to want to harvest them when they're between 4 and 5 inches long, and you're going to want to leave about 1 inch on the stem when you trim them off and harvest with your pruning shears. And they might last a couple days in the fridge, but you're going to want to eat them promptly so that they don't get wrinkly, and they'll shrivel up over time the longer they're in the fridge. So eat them right away. So for our tomatillos, so you're going to harvest when the fruit is firm and the outer husk has split open. You can see in this photo at the bottom that the husk, the outer protecting, it's almost like a leaf protection that grows around the fruit. That's going to burst open, and you're going to know that your tomatillo is ready to harvest. And the more ripe they are, the longer they're on the vine, the sweeter they'll taste. And I just found a really great recipe for tomatillos, salsa verde. Oh, it's so simple, just onions. You can roast the tomatillos, cut them in half, roast them in the oven for just till they're brown. And then you put them in the blender with some onion, with cilantro and salt, and it can make a really delicious salsa verde. So looking forward to trying that. Okay, so for our tomatoes, so you're going to want to allow them to stay on the vine until they're fully ripened. This will give the best flavor for the fruit. They should be bright red, depending on the variety, or bright colored, orange, yellow, depending on what variety you got. For our San Marzano tomatoes from Verde, they'll turn bright red, and they are excellent for canning, in sauces, for Italian food, or eating fresh with salads. And moving on to our okra, you're going to want to pick the pods when they're between 2 and 4 inches long for the green okra, or 4 to 6 inches for the red okra. If you let it get too big, it's going to be really tough. It's going to have this woody texture, and it's difficult to eat. It's less flavorful. So you want to pick them when they're small. Some say a good guide is the size of your pinky finger. So the stems are thick, and you'll need a sharp knife or pruning shears to harvest them. Okay, and then moving on to our cucumbers. If you plan to pickle your cucumbers, small ones work best. The larger they grow, the more seedy they become. However, the Japanese cucumbers, which are the long, skinny ones, they can reach lengths of 10 to 16 inches long. The more you harvest, the more they will grow. If cucumbers start to turn yellow, they'll become bitter and are overripe. So harvest frequently for the best results. Zucchini can be harvested when they're as small as your finger. Oftentimes, the ones that we see in the store that are quite large are actually overripe, and they lose their flavor. When you harvest when they're small, they're gonna have a better taste. And the other cool thing about zucchini is you can eat the blossoms. You can put a little cheese inside and a light cooking oil, and cook it on both sides, and it's a delicious little treat. And there's other ways you can serve them in salads and cook them in a variety of ways. Okay, and then for our cilantro, you're just going to cut the leaves and the stems to encourage new growth. And they're another cut and come again. Leave, an inch at the base, and it will continue to regrow. If it does happen to flower, go ahead and let it flower, and wait until it produces seeds, and then you're going to want to harvest those seeds, and you can reuse them actually for our fall planting day. Once they're dried out, store them in an envelope. Do not put them in a plastic bag or anything. Put them in an envelope and store them in a cool, dark place, and they will keep really well. You can also use cilantro seeds in cooking. And finally, bitter melon. For those of our sites that receive bitter melon, you're going to want to harvest when the fruit is 4 to 6 inches long and the blossoms have dropped. They can also get bigger, but they taste the best and are at their peak flavor when they're 4 to 6 inches long. Okay, moving on to food preservation. We're going to talk about a variety of ways to preserve your food. Sometimes when you're gardening, you get an abundance of harvest all at once, and in order for it to not go to waste, it's helpful to know different methods of preservation for the food. So there are several methods for preserving your garden harvest. Preservation techniques are important so that all your hard work in your garden does not go to waste. Sometimes your garden will produce more vegetables than you're able to use immediately, so knowing how to preserve them will give you the most benefit for your invested time, energy, and money. So the first method we'll talk about is drying and dehydrating. In the Bay Area, we live in a climate warm enough to dry some of our harvest outside in the sun. Sun-dried tomatoes are especially delicious. So select fresh, firm tomatoes, slice them thinly, approximately 1/4 inch thick, and then lay them on a mesh tray out in the sun. If they're placed on a baking tray, they'll stick to the pan and get stuck. Thus, it's best to find a plastic or wire mesh tray or use parchment paper underneath over the baking tray for easy removal once dried. Leave the tomatoes outside to dry for a few hours. You may want to cover them with a mesh cover to keep flies off of the drying fruit. If your tomatoes still have some moisture in them after a few hours, you can use your oven to finish the process. Set your oven at the lowest temperature, around 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and leave the door slightly ajar for airflow. Keep a close eye on them so they do not burn. If you decide to solely use your oven and not place them out in the sun, it will take anywhere from 2 to 6 hours to fully dry your tomatoes at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the tomato and how thick they are cut. So I found, you can see pictures on the left of the screen here. One person did the oven dried method, and you can kind of see the before and the after for that. And then there's also like many different ways. You can Google how to dry food or how to build your own food drying box, but I thought that this one was kind of cool. It has the protective cover over it so that the bugs don't get in there or leaves or debris blow onto them, but it's angled up towards the sun and you can safely dry food on that. So that was just a cool homemade version of a sun drying method that I thought I would share with you all. Okay, for garlic and herbs, you're going to want to wash them thoroughly, pat them dry, and then tie them in bunches and hang them upside down from a hook in your kitchen until dried. Check your herbs for any signs of mold or decay before placing the dried herbs in a glass jar for storage. You can also lay dried herbs on a baking tray, place them in the freezer until frozen, and then place them in a freezer-safe bag for long-term storage in the freezer. So the reason you do this is so that if you want to freeze them flat before putting them in a bag, because if you just put them in the bag and directly into the freezer, they're going to all stick together. So you want them to be able to be easily separated. So recipes which call for fresh herbs can be used in the same measurements when dried. So 1 tablespoon of fresh is 1 tablespoon of dried herbs. Garlic can be braided and stored in a cool, dry place. So with anything that you're storing, like garlic, potatoes, any root vegetables, you're going to want to have it in a cool place, in a dark place, so like in a cupboard, or we don't really have basements out here too much. I grew up in the Midwest, and so we had nice basements for storing our vegetables. But yeah, just find a cool, dark, dry place that's not going to have humidity, and that would be a good place to store some of your root vegetables. And then I thought it would be cool to share just this pretty method of braiding your garlic together. Simple, pretty thing you can just hang in your kitchen as long as it doesn't get too much sun, or depending on how long you want to store them and how quickly you will go through the garlic. So, all right, our next two methods, we've got bottling and canning, and then blanching and freezing. So for canning, before you begin, you're going to wash your glass jars and sterilize them in boiling water for 10 minutes, including the lids. This will help avoid mold from forming. So you're going to keep them in the hot water until they're ready to use. There are many methods and tools for bottling and canning your food. Some examples include an electric water bath canning machine, pressure canners, or even just a simple water bath method, which you just need a very large pot. They have a little frame for holding up the jars so that they shouldn't be touching the bottom of the pan, because you're going to have the boiling water and they'll sit in there for a while. But it's fairly simple. Some of these supplies can be found at the thrift store, or a lot of the main retailers around are selling canning supplies right now. You may be even able to find them on like a buy sell swap page on Facebook, Craigslist. So just keep an eye out for some of the tools. And as you can see, in the photo here, we've got the big canning pot, we've got the jars with the metal rings, and then there's a special tongs that you use to lift the jars out of the boiling water. So all of those tools are pretty essential for canning, but simple, and once you have them, you can use them for years and years to come. So, okay. So if you're, like I said, if you're able to invest in some canning supplies, you will save money in the long term, and you'll have a way to store large quantities of food, which will last all winter and really just prolong your harvest and your ability to eat it throughout the year. Our next method is blanching and freezing. So blanching is a process in which you briefly boil your vegetables, usually between 1 and 3 minutes, depending on the vegetable, to stop decay. Start by cleaning your vegetables thoroughly, chopping them into small pieces, and then submerging them in boiling water. After boiling for a minute or two, quickly remove the vegetables from the hot water and put them in ice-cold water. This will stop the cooking process, but disable the enzymes which lead to decay. From here, you can place your vegetables in freezer bags and freeze. Be sure to label your freezer bags with the type of food, the date, and if you have a food scale, the weight or quantity, such as like 1 cup, 2 cups. This is going to help you when you come back to it later, because you're not going to remember what you did or how much it was months later. So it's good to always label accurately and thoroughly. You can also freeze your herbs, like I said, by placing them in an ice cube tray and then covering them in oil, so olive oil, for example. And then when you're ready to use, you pop them out of the tray, and you can use it to saute vegetables or for stir fry meals. And if we were in class, I would encourage everyone to take a minute and share contact information if anybody in the group knows how to do canning and is willing to be a resource for the rest of the group. It'd be really great if you could let each other know, since we are not in person yet due to COVID. You can share with your coordinator that you're willing to be a resource and either provide an email or a phone number and how you would prefer communication, whether text or otherwise, or phone calls. And that way you can continue to help your group if they, if this is their first time canning and they're unsure of what they're doing, or if something didn't go quite right, you can be a resource for your community. For food preservation. Right. Now, finally, our climate change topic. Does climate change affect global pandemics? So over the past several months, we've learned about climate change and how our actions affect our environment. We've learned the dangers of global warming and its impact on ecosystems, plants, animals, oceans, and humans. We learned ways to reduce our carbon footprint so that we limit harmful gases emitted to the atmosphere through transportation emissions, garbage, and mass consumption of goods, which in turn damage our planet's ozone layer and increase temperatures globally in both ocean and on land. The temperature increases melt ice caps, causing rising sea levels, which harm biodiversity in land and ocean ecosystems. Basically, this means rising temperatures creates mass extinction of plants and animals and turns fertile lands into desert. Recent studies from Stanford University also indicate that rising temperatures can impact the spread of global disease. Examples include mosquito-borne illnesses like West Nile disease, yellow fever, malaria, and dengue fever. Mosquitoes prefer warm, humid climates. Thus, as the global temperatures rise, mosquitoes are able to migrate to new locations that were previously too cold. With this migration, due to the changes in temperature, humidity, and rainfall, diseases can be transferred to new regions of the world, as happened with the 1878 yellow fever outbreak in the United States. Moreover, the same Stanford study reported that certain diseases are spread within certain temperature ranges that are ideal for the spread of and survival of the virus. Thus, altering global temperatures through greenhouse gas pollution changes the regions at risk for the spread of diseases that were previously not a threat. Um, as you can see on your screen, just some brief points, how climate change impacts the spread of disease. So deforestation is pushing wild animals and humans closer into contact. So as you can see from the little cartoon, the bats are hanging on the power line, and the sun is hot, it looks kind of smoggy in the photo, but that's just a visual cartoon of what happens when we destroy the habitats of wild animals. They're forced to relocate, and oftentimes it puts us in closer contact with animals that we previously did not have contact with, and this also exposes us to their diseases. Rising temperatures allow disease to spread to new areas, as I mentioned, and rapidly changing ecosystems also create an opportunity for a rapidly changing pathogen or illness. So as the environment changes, the disease actually changes as well to adapt because it wants to survive. Finally, increased pollution means it decreased immune response in humans and in animals. So the more pollution that we live with, the more pollution we breathe and drink in our water, it's going to decrease our body's ability to fight off disease because it's weakening our immune system. It's decreasing our overall health and our overall ability to fight off disease. So all of these things are interconnected. Sometimes we think it's an isolated incident that's not related to climate or health, and really it's a big food web. It's a big interconnected ecosystem, and all parts influence each other. So what can we do? What are our action steps? So our long-term changes that we really need to make, these are just two among many, but reducing global deforestation. So if we put pressure for companies to stop cutting down forests for the mass monocrop agriculture, that's going to impact our planet. And then for those areas that have been deforested, we really need to push replanting. And not replanting with a monocrop, but replanting with diverse indigenous native plants to the region that will increase and return the diversity of life, plants, animals, insects. It's all important. One organization that I know about that does reforestation is called Eden Reforestation, and businesses can actually partner with them, and they'll do something where it's like, for every purchase you make at this company, we'll plant a tree. And so there's kind of that business collaboration, which can help companies that are trying to have sustainable and eco-friendly practices. So maybe to off-put the carbon cost, the carbon footprint of creating a new product, they then replant a tree. And the cool thing about Eden Reforestation is that they also hire the whole community to plant the trees. And so it also helps create jobs and address problems with poverty and that type of thing. So they're not affiliated with us at all, but it's just an organization that I knew of. I'm sure there's others out there that are doing the work of replanting our forests. As you can see from the photo, the before and after of land that was deforested versus now replanted. So then also, obviously, we've been talking about this all year, but reducing our carbon footprint significantly by making drastic lifestyle and industry changes. we need to move away from oil dependency. We need to focus on local industry and sustainable lifestyle choices. And just a little refresher for you what carbon footprint means. So it is the total amount of greenhouse gas emissions that come from transportation, energy use, and other sources. These gases trap heat in the atmosphere, causing global warming. And as we've talked about, there's a ripple effect. When the planet warms, you know, the ice caps melt, the sea levels rise, the ocean temperatures rise, and this will kill life in the oceans. This will create deserts in land that used to be fertile, decreasing rainfall due to increased temperature and evaporation of water more quickly. And so it's all interconnected. So our footprint, we each are responsible. So the waste we produce, our ability to recycle and reuse and reduce our consumption, factories that we purchase from and support that are causing pollution, our use of gas and electricity, our transportation emissions, and then our fuel. All of those are just pieces of our carbon footprint. And by limiting and reducing our consumption of these things, we're really helping our planet conserve its natural resources, which are limited. Okay, so that was kind of our long-term response to the pandemic. Our short-term is really taking care of our health and protecting one another from getting infected. So our short-term response, wash your hands. Make sure that you're washing all sides of your hands, under your nails for 30 seconds with soap. You're going to rinse and dry your hands and then use the paper towel to turn off the faucet and to open the bathroom door and then throw away the paper towel. This is going to prevent you from getting new germs on your hands as you're leaving a bathroom. Wear your mask. It's really important that it fits around your face. You can transmit the coronavirus disease just by talking, singing, laughing. There's tiny little moisture particles that come out of your mouth when you speak. And so when you're around other people, you risk transmitting or breathing in theirs. Okay, so make sure that your face mask that you're wearing is clean. If you're using a reusable one, a cloth mask, you want to make sure you wear a fresh one every time that you go out. Don't reuse it. So as I said, breathing, talking, singing, sneezing can pass germs. If you have to sneeze, sneeze into your elbow. It's like do the dab. Sneeze into your elbow because that is not going to put the germs on your hands. If you sneeze into your hand and then you touch anything, it's contaminating and it also doesn't catch it very well. Be sure to stay 6 feet away from others when you must be in public places like the grocery store. Follow those tape lines and stand back. When you're at the grocery store, if you have gloves that you can wear them, or just wash your hands before and after going into the store. And you may even want to use like a Clorox wipe or spray down the groceries that you bring home. So like any boxes or containers that you can, or hand wash your fruit and vegetables. So that's going to really help reduce the spread of the disease. So be sure to be eating a healthy diet, and according to the MyPlate guidelines that we've reviewed a few times in our nutrition curriculum, and with at least half of your plate being fruits and vegetables at each meal. This is going to fortify your body with the vitamins and strengthen your immune system to be able to fight disease. Be sure to cook foods thoroughly to kill bacteria, especially in animal products. And during this time, we recommend not sharing food. Serve food on individual plates or containers and avoid large shared plates. And also encourage your family members and kids not to share drinks, not to share utensils. And for more information, you can Google the CDC guidelines for COVID-19. And they have multiple languages available if you scroll to the bottom of their page. And I will put a link in the resources for you to go to that. All right, so finally, I just wanted to do some brief announcements. At the end of each video, we're asking that you fill out a brief 3-question survey on Google Forms. If you're unable to access it, just let your coordinator know, and that way we can kind of take your virtual attendance, which is really important for our program so that we know you're learning, you're participating, and our funders can have the accountability that we're doing our job and that we're really making an impact in the community, and their financial support is going to good use. So that's important for us, especially since we're not meeting in person right now. So like I said, answer the questions, contact your coordinator, let them know you watched the video. And then if you feel comfortable, you can schedule a home visit for our coordinators to come look at your garden. They will be sure to wear a mask, and they won't enter your home. They can just go around the side of the house or facility to your garden, and they don't even have to come inside. If you're not comfortable with that, if you could please send a photo of your garden to your coordinator and any questions that you may have, or even if it's just to share a picture of your harvest or something you made with your vegetables, that would be awesome. And any questions you have to the general public, any questions you can send to info@valleyverde.org, and we'd be happy to address any gardening questions that you have. In May, I just wanted to share a follow-up. In May, we had a seedling giveaway in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and shelter in place. Many people lost their jobs, and food banks, the shelves were being cleared. The grocery store shelves were being cleared, and so as a response, we collaborated with several local organizations, and we were able to distribute over 6,000 organic vegetable seedlings to our community, to 1,500, more than 1,500 low-income families in the community in Santa Clara County. And so if you are still in need of seedlings, we are doing another giveaway probably in October. So be looking for information on that. October 2020, we will hopefully schedule another seedling giveaway. So that's in the process right now of being planned. So thank you for your support and for watching this video. And I hope you find it beneficial and helpful for your gardening and for developing your own food sovereignty, which is really important in these times. Thanks again.